In the year 1637, Gian Lorenzo Bernini immortalized the beauty of his lover, Costanza Piccolomini Bonarelli, in marble. Just 1 year later, he destroyed that beauty forever. This is the story of Bernini's violent attack against his lover, a crime fueled by passion, jealousy, and betrayal. Welcome to About Art, Tales of Torment, Tragedy and Talent, the podcast where I explore the dark, sinister side of art history, giving voice to stories of crime, betrayal, tragedy and trauma that shaped the lives and works of some of history's greatest artists. Join me, art historian, content creator and presenter Tatiana Calagian-Saraino, as I uncover the passions and at times violent impulses that fueled masterpieces and destroyed lives. This is episode 1. Bernini, Costanza, and jealous rage. Bernini is widely regarded as a master of the Italian Baroque, a sculptor who could transform marble into any material he saw fit, capturing movement and emotion with astonishing realism and breathtaking drama. As an artist, he was near perfect, but as a human being, he was far from it. And that's exactly what this episode is about. I'm going to look into a very violent crime that Bernini committed at the height of his artistic career. A crime that not only disfigured the woman that he claimed to love, but that also sheds light on the privileges afforded to powerful men in 17th century Rome. The real historical event, while well documented, is not discussed nearly enough, especially in comparison to how much we talk about the life and work of Bernini, highlighting him as a very successful and highly prolific artist and sculptor. That being said, I think a brief overview of Bernini's artistic oeuvre is necessary in this case to provide a little bit of context, especially for those of you who might not be that well acquainted with his work. And then, once we've done that, we'll address Costanza's story. Bernini was born in Naples in 1598. A child prodigy, he sculpted his first significant work, the goat Amaltea with the infant Jupiter and a faun, at just 11 years old. His father, Pietro Bernini, was a very successful sculptor who introduced his son to the trade early on and who certainly encouraged him. In 1606, when Pope Paul V invited Pietro to work on the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, the entire family moved to Rome. And there, Bernini's talent caught the attention of several influential figures, including Cardinal Maffeo Barberini and Cardinal Scipione Borghese, the nephew of the Pope. This led to a flourishing career spanning 6 successive papacies, making Bernini one of the most important, prolific, and sought-after artists of his time. Armed with a chisel, Bernini could breathe life into stone, sculpting figures from marble who seemed to pulse with vitality and emotion. He was, without a doubt, one of the greatest artists of his time, and he remains, to this day, my favorite sculptor. I first encountered the work of Bernini on a school trip to the Borghese Gallery in Rome, which is where most of his works are still housed today. I must have been about 16 years old, and I remember being utterly transfixed and blown away by Bernini's grand, dramatic, and interlocking sculptures of mythological and biblical figures caught in the midst of action, in moments of turmoil, struggle, passion, and danger, as if frozen in time. I remember standing in front of his Apollo and Daphne of 1622 to 1625, utterly transfixed. The dynamic sculpture, which depicts the very moment in which Daphne transforms into a laurel tree to escape from Apollo's advances, is a great example of how Bernini changed the way that we interact with sculpture. This work demands to be seen in the round, as each angle showcases a different split-second moment from the tragic myth. He was also a master at manipulating marble to convey texture and materiality. In The Rape of Proserpina of 1621 to 1622, the way Pluto's fingers seem to sink into Proserpina's soft human flesh as he abducts her renders the solidity of the cold, hard marble virtually non-existent. His works are dynamic, unstable, and imbued with an almost cinematic drama. His David of 1623 to 1624 is depicted mid-action, his muscles tensed and his face set in determination. In comparison to earlier Renaissance sculptures that tend to depict David with this sort of still, static confidence, Bernini's David is caught in the split-second act of hurling his stone, his entire body coiled like a spring and his expression brimming with intense emotion. And then there's the ecstasy of Saint Teresa of 1647 to 1652, a sculptural ensemble, a complex bel composto that combines sculpture, architecture, theatre, painting, and light to create this all-immersive experience. As an artist, Bernini was also fiercely committed to his craft. When he was just 19 years old and in the process of sculpting St. Lawrence being burned on the grill, his biographer tells us that in order to accurately capture and render the pain of being burned by fire, Bernini exposed his own bare thigh to a blazing brazier and then observed his own expressions of pain in a mirror. While the sculpted martyr isn't visibly grimacing, we can't deny the subtle expression of suffering that Bernini has managed to capture. And whether true or not, the anecdote gives us a sense of his intense passion and his commitment to realism. Beyond these mythological and religious subjects, Bernini also revolutionized portraiture. His marble busts of kings, popes, and members of papal families pioneered this new informal style of portraiture that has been referred to, that has been called a speaking likeness. Bernini's sculptural figures are sort of captured or arrested mid-thought, mid-speech, or gesturing, thereby conveying a sense of psychological immediacy. And one of the best examples of this is Bernini's portrait of Scipione Borghese. Made in 1632, it shows the cardinal with his mouth slightly open, as if caught in conversation. The effect is startlingly lifelike and makes us feel as if he's standing and breathing right before us. Today, I want to focus on a lesser-known work, a marble bust of a woman that was sculpted between 1636 and 1637, that is both a testament to Bernini's love, as well as an eerie foreshadowing of his violent crime that was to follow soon after. The woman's name was Costanza Piccolomini Bonarelli, and she was Bernini's lover. By the way, if you want any more information on Bernini, then do check out some of my other YouTube videos on him. Costanza was an Italian noblewoman. She was also the wife of the artist Matteo Bonarelli, who was also one of Bernini's assistants for the numerous projects that he was working on at St. Peter's Basilica at the time in Rome. Costanza and Bernini met when Bernini was 38 years old and still a bachelor. They instantly became infatuated with one another and swiftly began an affair. And I think their passion for one another really comes through, really speaks through the marble sculptural bust that Bernini carved of her. Now, whether Matteo knew of the affair or whether he was oblivious or complicit in it is unknown. And most art historical scholarship also doesn't tell us too much about the life of Costanza prior to her meeting Bernini. The most comprehensive overview of her life is by Sarah McPhee. Her book, Bernini's Beloved, A Portrait of Costanza Piccolomini, is an illuminating biography that I highly recommend reading if you'd like to find out more about her life and lineage. I'll add a link to it in the description box down below, and I'll also be quoting McPhee a few times in the rest of this episode. The almost life-size sculptural bust, rendered in Carrara marble, depicts Costanza dressed in a partially unbuttoned chemise or shirt, gazing spontaneously to the left. Her features are pronounced and strong, and her skin is smooth and completely unblemished. Her hair is loosely pulled back into this hurried yet effortless coiled braid, and it falls in waves around her face. A single escaped curl coils at the base of her neck as well. Her eyebrows are tensed, her eyes wide and fierce, and her lips are slightly parted as if in the midst of a dialogue. I think she appears sort of startled, both disheveled and composed at the same time. It's such an animated sculpture. We sense that she's just about to speak, or perhaps she's just spoken. And as we've already discussed, speaking likeness was a hallmark of Bernini's portraits and a technique that he employed often. He believed that capturing a person mid-conversation was the best way to capture their authentic personality. And he once said, and here I had to look to my notes because I'm quoting him, "To make a successful portrait, one should choose an action and attempt to represent it well. The best time to render the mouth is when the subject has just spoken or is just about to begin speaking. that one should try to catch this moment. The sculpture is informal, intimate and central, and really gives a sense of Costanza's captivating presence. Indeed, it's almost as if we can still sort of hear and see her breathing through the marble stone itself. Not only does it provide us with a sort of tangible sense of Costanza's appearance, demeanor, but also her character. And it's important to note that it's a sculpture that was never intended for public display. Bernini sculpted it of his own volition. In other words, it wasn't a commissioned work. He sculpted it of his own desire. It was Bernini's way of capturing in stone the likeness of his lover, seen through his eyes and his feelings for her. You can almost liken the sculpture to the candid photos that you sneakily take of your partner or lover in a sort of selfish attempt to immortalize a moment of intimacy. It's tender and it's sentimental. And to further enhance the realism of the sculpture, Bernini would have highlighted the irises of Costanza's eyes with charcoal to represent the effective light reflected from the center of the pupil, before chiseling out these places he had marked so that the darkness of the charcoal was replaced by shadow. Not only was this an uncommissioned work, it was also quite unusual and quite rare to be portrayed in this manner. At the time, in 17th century Italy, unless you were part of a noble ruling family, or if you were having your family portrait created for a commemorative purpose, as a woman, you wouldn't be rendered in marble this way. And what's more, this is the only known sculpture that Bernini ever created of a woman that he was personally involved with. So no images, no works of his wife, his sisters or his daughters exist. Just Costanza. So everything about this sculpture, from its conception to how Costanza is rendered, really speaks volumes of Bernini's affection for her. It's very clear that the two were infatuated with one another, that they were very intimate with one another. And to put it shortly, Bernini was obsessed with her. Costanza was just 23 years old when this was sculpted, and Bernini 39 years old. Everything was going smoothly, let's say, until April of 1638, when Bernini heard rumors that Costanza had also been sleeping with his younger brother, Luigi. And this is where our story takes a very dark turn. In order to validate the rumor, Bernini set a trap. He pretended that he was going to go out of town, but in reality, he hid in a carriage outside of Costanza's house. At the time, just to set the scene, she was living in a rented house at the foot of the Quirinal Hill in Rome, in Piazza Scanderbeg, which is just a short walk from the Trevi Fountain and the Pantheon. That day, we know that her husband was working at St. Peter's Basilica. But that very morning, hiding in his carriage, Bernini saw a man exiting Costanza's front door and her greeting him in her bedclothes. So she wasn't appropriately or fully dressed, hinting at intimate activity. And that man was Luigi. And as you can imagine, Bernini was infuriated. Overcome with rage, jealousy, and betrayal, he sent one of his servants to slash and disfigure Costanza's face with a razor as punishment for her being unfaithful. The servant turned up at Costanza's house with 2 flasks of Greek wine before enacting the horrendous attack. The ghastly wound left Costanza forever disfigured. Historians believe that she may have been treated by a barber surgeon, as physicians at the time would have refused to tend to a disgraced woman, which apparently she was, for having slept with Bernini's brother, even though she and Bernini were already involved in an affair of their own. Bernini also turned on his brother Luigi. Blinded by rage, he chased Luigi through St. Peter's Basilica, and he actually beat him so ferociously with an iron rod that he ended up breaking 2 of his ribs. Later, when Luigi managed to flee and escape from the madman that Bernini had become and find refuge in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, Bernini allegedly kicked through the doors and searched the chapels and aisles, pulsating with rage and fury and betrayal, armed with a sword in hand. We know that Bernini's mother, in a desperate attempt to intervene and to save her son Luigi, pleaded with the Pope at the time, who actually did intervene. Luigi was sent to Bologna for his own safety, where he stayed for about a year, and Bernini was encouraged to take a wife. So within the year, he was married to Caterina Tezio, with whom he had 9 children, I think, and they ended up staying together until her death in 1637. And Bernini gave his bust of Costanza away. As for his horrendous crime against Costanza, Bernini shockingly received no real punishment due to papal favor. An anonymous document from the archives in Florence tells us that he was fined 3,000 scudi, but he was later excused from paying anything by Pope Urban VIII, who considered him irreplaceable. And in fact, in his memoir of the artist, Bernini's son Domenico tells us, and here I quote, the Pope assured of the deed, gave the order that Bernini's servant was to be exiled, and he sent his manservant to the Cavaliere meaning Bernini, with a parchment absolving him of the deed. He was absolved for no other motive than because he was excellent in art, which is ridiculous. The parchment addressed Bernini as a rare man, sublime genius, born according to a divine plan for the glory of Rome and to bring light to this century. At the time, Bernini was at the height of his artistic career. He was building towers on the facade of St. Peter's Basilica. He was carving marble portraits of popes and kings. He was, in short, the Pope's favorite artist, and he was hence untouchable, hence his pardoning. What's more, his shocking, brutal, and unforgiving assault against Costanza was, you'll be shocked to hear, actually not that uncommon for the time. In her novel, The Silkworm Keeper, author Deborah Swift reveals that the slashing or cutting of the faces of disobedient women was actually quite common practice in 17th century Italy and was known as sfregio, which means the scar. Although it was widely practiced or more often practiced upon prostitutes, courtesans, and street dwellers, these sort of attacks were considered a demonstration of power, control, and ownership, and were, in a sense, encouraged in order to discourage unruly behavior. This could, at least in part, also account for Bernini's pardoning, which, for a present-day listener, is unfathomable and very, very difficult to hear. As for Costanza, records indicate that she was sent to Il Monasterio di Casa Pia, a house for wayward women, courtesans and prostitutes located near the Pantheon for 4 months before being allowed to return to her husband. She was also obliged to donate 1/3 of her estate to the nuns of Santa Maria Maddalena delle Convertite, which she did in 1662. And what's more, she faced societal ostracism. However, despite all this, she showed immense strength and resilience, forging an independent life for herself, which Sarah McPhee chronicles in her book, really showcasing how Costanza was able to show determination, strength, and autonomy in a male-dominated society. Nevertheless, it doesn't change the fact that she was left forever disfigured by the man that she once loved. So now that you know the full story, I'm sure you'll see the marble bust of Costanza in a different light. One that allows you to fully appreciate the poignancy of it as a work of art. Not only does it capture Costanza's beauty, it also immortalizes it when, in real life, it was forever destroyed. And how tragically ironic it is that her beauty was destroyed by the very same man who once sculpted it. So the next time you see her marble bust, I hope that you also think of Costanza's story. Thank you for listening to the About Art Tales of Torment, Tragedy and Talent podcast. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. If you did, please give it a like and consider sharing it with a friend. Since I'm at the very beginning stages of this podcast, I would appreciate any thoughts, comments, feedback, and suggestions. If you'd like to hear more content from me, then please make sure to subscribe to this channel. I'm also active on TikTok. You can find me at Tatiana About Art, on Instagram at aboutart.tks, and also on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. I've also recently published a book, Love, Heartbreak, and Tragedy in Art. It's a compilation of some of my favorite works of art centered around the theme of lost love and heartbreak. If you'd like to find out more or get your very own copy, then head over to my website, www.aboutartbytatiana.com, or click the link in the description box down below. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.